The 2022 Oscars. Inside, the Dolby Theater golden lights covered the room while Hollywood's biggest stars smiled beneath the cameras and endless applause. In the front row, Will Smith sat beside his wife. He smiled a lot that night, just like he had smiled for more than 30 years. Hollywood once loved Will Smith in a very special way, not just because he was famous, but because he made everything feel comfortable. In an industry filled with scandals, addictions, and broken marriages, Will Smith felt different. He was funny, positive, charismatic, family-oriented. He was the kind of celebrity television networks loved inviting, the kind of actor studios trusted with hundreds of millions of dollars. People looked at him and thought, this man has the perfect life. And maybe Will Smith spent years trying to convince himself that it was true. From a young rapper in Philadelphia, he entered Hollywood with an energy that never seemed to fade. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air turned him into a television star. Then movies pushed him into a level of fame very few actors ever reach. Men in Black, Independence Day, Ali, The Pursuit of Happiness. His name became a global symbol. But behind all the success, Will Smith carried a strange fear inside him. He was terrified of failure. Not just failure in his career, but failure as a man. Maybe it started in childhood. Will grew up in a home where tension was always present. His father was strict, intimidating, and unpredictable. Years later, Will admitted that as a child, he learned to survive by making people laugh. Because when people were smiling, everything felt safer. And that child never truly disappeared. Even as an adult, Will Smith kept trying to make everyone happy. The audience, Hollywood, his family, the media, and himself. He built an image so perfect, the world forgot he was human. Over the years, Will Smith gained money, fame, and one of Hollywood's most famous families. But there was still one thing missing, an Oscar. For decades, he chased that golden statue like it was proof of something deeper. Proof that he was finally good enough, worthy enough, complete enough. And then, that night finally arrived. King Richard brought him closer than ever to the award he had wanted his entire life. Everything seemed perfect. A legendary career, a wife beside him, an audience ready to celebrate him. But the most dangerous thing about people who always appear strong is that nobody notices how much pain they've been hiding inside. And sometimes people don't break because of one moment. They break because they've been holding themselves together for far too long. And in just a few minutes, the entire world was about to witness Will Smith collapse in real time. The Oscars continued like normal. Music played softly. Cameras moved across famous faces. Laughter echoed through the theater. Nobody knew that history was seconds away from changing. Chris Rock walked onto the stage with his usual confidence. Relaxed, sharp, funny. That was what people expected from him. Chris started making jokes about celebrities sitting in the audience. Then his eyes landed on Jada Pinkett Smith. Jada had shaved her head because of alopecia. Chris smiled and said, Jada, G.I. Jane 2. Can't wait to see it. The audience laughed. The camera cut to Will Smith. He laughed too. A familiar smile. The smile of a man who had spent his entire life making everything look okay. But then the camera showed Jada. She wasn't smiling. Her expression changed for only a few seconds. And maybe that was the exact moment something inside Will Smith finally cracked. Later, many people asked, why would Will react so violently to one joke? But maybe the slap was never really about the joke. It was years of pressure, years of humiliation, years of trying to protect a marriage falling apart in public, years of pretending everything was fine while the internet laughed at him. And eventually, all of those emotions found a way out. Will Smith stood up. He slowly walked toward the stage. At first, nobody in the theater understood what was happening. Some people were still laughing, thinking it was part of the show. Chris Rock looked confused. Then, smack. The sound echoed across the room. Not loud, but loud enough to silence the entire theater. Chris Rock froze. So did everyone else. Will turned around and walked back to his seat like a man acting entirely on emotion. Then he shouted, "Keep my wife's name out your mouth." For the first time in decades, the world stopped seeing Will Smith the superstar. They saw a man completely losing control in front of millions of people. What made the moment terrifying was that it happened live. No editing, no script, no way to hide it. Millions of people watched a global icon collapse in real time. And the cruelest part, only minutes later, Will Smith won the Oscar for Best Actor. The moment he had dreamed about his entire life became the exact moment the world would never look at him the same way again. But the truth is, the Oscars were not where the story began. They were simply where everything finally exploded, because behind that slap was a marriage that had been slowly breaking Will Smith for years. To the public, Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith looked like one of Hollywood's most powerful couples. They appeared everywhere together. Red carpets, interviews, award shows, family videos filled with laughter. And whenever Will looked at Jada, it never felt casual. It felt like he was terrified of losing her. There was always something fragile hidden inside Will Smith. No matter how successful he became, he constantly seemed desperate to feel love. Maybe because deep down, Will never fully believed he was enough. Not successful enough, not strong enough, not worthy enough to be loved without constantly proving himself. And maybe that was why he held on to his marriage so tightly. As the years passed, people slowly noticed something changing. Their interviews began to feel uncomfortable. Jada often spoke about love and marriage in ways that felt distant. Meanwhile, Will kept smiling. But sometimes, his smile felt more like survival than happiness. Then came 2020, and the world witnessed what may have been one of the most painful moments of Will Smith's life. During Red Table Talk, Jada admitted she had been involved in what she called an entanglement with a younger man named August Alsina. But what shocked people most wasn't just the affair. It was Will Smith sitting there listening to everything in front of millions of viewers. He tried to smile, tried to stay calm, tried to appear mature, but his eyes told a completely different story. He looked like a man desperately trying not to fall apart on camera. The internet turned him into a meme almost immediately. People mocked the way he looked at Jada, the pain in his face, the fact that he kept defending the relationship anyway, and maybe that humiliation stayed with him longer than anyone realized. Because despite everything, Will kept protecting Jada, kept defending the marriage, kept trying to convince the world and himself that everything was still okay. Many people never understood why, but maybe Will Smith didn't just love Jada. He needed her. Because for years, his entire identity was built around one idea: my family has to stay together. If that marriage collapsed, maybe part of him would collapse too. So he kept enduring, kept smiling, kept pretending, even while the entire world could already see the cracks. And then the Oscars happened. One joke, one glance from Jada, one moment where Will Smith may have felt like he had failed her again. But this time, he didn't laugh. After years of suppressing everything inside him, Will Smith finally let his emotions escape. Unfortunately, the whole world was watching. Only minutes after the slap, Will Smith walked back onto the stage, this time to receive his first Oscar. The audience stood and applauded. Some people were emotional. Some were confused. Some didn't even know how to react anymore. Will held the golden statue in his hands. It was the moment he had chased for decades, the moment that should have made him immortal in Hollywood history. But when people looked at his face, there was no real feeling of victory anymore. Only a man trying to keep himself together before completely collapsing. During his acceptance speech, Will cried. He spoke about love, about protecting family, about how people sometimes do crazy things for the people they love. But by then, the world had already stopped listening. because only minutes earlier, everything had changed. That same night, the internet exploded. The slap spread across social media faster than almost anything Hollywood had seen in years. Nobody cared about the Oscar anymore. Nobody cared about King Richard. There was only the slap. One moment of lost control had swallowed the greatest achievement of his entire career. In the days that followed, everything began collapsing quickly. The Academy banned Will Smith from attending Oscar events for 10 years. Projects were delayed. Relationships inside Hollywood quietly became colder. Nobody openly said they were abandoning him, but Will could feel it. Later, Will Smith released a public apology to Chris Rock. There was no famous smile anymore. No superstar energy, only exhaustion. He admitted, "I was wrong," and maybe for the first time in his life. Will Smith stopped trying to appear perfect, but the internet never forgets. Every time his name appeared, people remembered the slap first. Not the legendary movies, not the decades of success, not the inspiration he once gave millions, just a few seconds of anger. That's the terrifying thing about modern fame. A person can spend an entire lifetime building an image, and one moment can redefine them forever. After the scandal, Will Smith slowly disappeared from the spotlight. Less interviews, less appearances, less smiling, and maybe the most painful realization of all was finally understanding that he had spent years trying to become the person everyone wanted him to be, until he no longer knew who he truly was anymore. Some people become more lonely the more famous they get, and maybe Will Smith was one of them. For more than 30 years, Will Smith lived as one of Hollywood's most beloved figures. He made people laugh, inspired millions, spoke proudly about family and love. People looked at him and thought, this man has everything. But sometimes, the people who look strongest are the ones carrying the heaviest weight, because they are never allowed to break. The 2022 Oscars were not just about a slap. They were about the moment the entire world watched a man emotionally collapse after years of trying to hold himself together. A man who spent his life trying to satisfy Hollywood audiences, his family, the media, and the woman he loved most. Until one day, he no longer had the strength to keep playing the role of perfect Will Smith. And the tragedy of it all was the timing. It happened on the exact night he finally achieved his greatest dream, an Oscar, the highest point of his career. But instead of becoming the night the world celebrated Will Smith, it became the night the world watched him fall apart. Even today, Will Smith is probably still trying to understand himself. Was he truly angry because of Chris Rock's joke? Or was it years of buried emotions finally exploding? Humiliation, pressure, emotional exhaustion, fear of losing his family, and the feeling that his entire life was slowly slipping out of his control. Because some cracks do not appear overnight. They form silently for years, until eventually everything breaks at once. Today, Will Smith is still moving forward, still acting, still appearing in public, still trying to rebuild after the moment that changed his life forever. But the old image will never fully return. And maybe the saddest part is this: the world may never remember him primarily for his greatest achievements, but for the exact moment he lost himself in front of everyone. A lifetime building an image. One moment destroying it. And the cruelest part of all was that the entire world saw it happen.